This is the Roxanne Show. Get ready. It's time to rise. I want to dive deep into the layers of one of my favorite attributes, and really it's a core value of mine, and that is integrity. Integrity is everything. It is, like I said, it's a core value of mine. It is something that personally matters to me, in terms of how I operate and function in my life, but it's also of equal importance to, the people that I keep closest to me. That's like a trait that lives in each of my very closest individuals. And I want to talk about why this attribute is so, so important. And I want to actually dive into some of the ways that you can start to fortify and really just expand your levels of integrity. So I thought it would be cool to actually read the definition of integrity. For those of you who don't know, I am a self-acclaimed logophile. What does that mean? Logophile is lover of words. I've been writing my whole life. So I always say, words are an experience, words cast spells. And I love to, even if I know the definition of a word, I love going into the dictionary and just seeing how it's stated in the dictionary. So let me start by reading you the definition of integrity. So there are two definitions for integrity in this dictionary that I looked up. So number one, the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. Number two, this one is really special to me. The state of being whole and undivided. Now, for my longtime listeners, you know that, wholeness it's a very important state that I'm always, in everything that I talk about, there's always this direction to bring us into a state of wholeness, right? Because to really live from your most empowered state, you are going to be operating from a place of wholeness where you are secure with your authentic self. You are essentially complete, which does not mean that there isn't space for others to come in and expand you and, add to you. But it's simply saying that as you are, you take full ownership and you feel complete within yourself, And so I love that this definition of integrity also states that it's, it's being in a state of wholeness and, or being whole and undivided. So I want to talk about, why is this so important, right? Some of you may already know this very well. A lot of you may already be operating with strong levels of integrity. But what I want to actually start with is, look, I'm in my fourth decade of life. And when I think back about my life and kind of evaluate how I functioned throughout it, let's focus on my 20s. My 20s, and as a writer my whole life, I have this all in my journal. Integrity was always built within me. Was I always operating at the highest levels of integrity? No. And there's lots of reasons for that. And that's not I'm not judging myself in any mean way. It's just, I'm always in observation of myself because it's important. It's important to witness ourselves and gather information so that we can learn about ourselves and learn about the ways at which we can, make improvements. And, if there's things to pivot and break through or shift from, you're only going to know that information if you're actually witnessing yourself. This is why self-awareness is such an important conversation for me always. It is the greatest agent for change and for growth, right? So when I think about some of the moments in my 20s, where I wasn't operating at, my highest levels of integrity. Again, I can also understand why in those moments. There were several reasons. Maybe I wasn't operating at the highest state of health, meaning like, I'd be up all night or, I lived in New York City. I used to throw parties for a living. I'm also in Hawaii too. So there was that. Age, related. It was younger, and we could be a little bit more messy in those years, and it's part of the process, right? It's part of how we get to this place within ourselves where we're able to realize what matters to us, like what are our priorities. The important thing to say is that it wasn't that I didn't have integrity. I absolutely did. It was just the standards at which I was holding myself to with this particular attribute were not as consistent or as high at some moments. It wasn't this, decade of being a mess, not painting that picture. If that was the truth, I would just share it. Fuck it. But that's not the case. It was just some moments where I'm like, ooh, you could have fucking done that better there. Or you could have, taken more ownership and self-accountability in that moment. And then all of that relates back to levels of integrity. The cool part is that, that's behind me, right? And I've learned, and, from that decade into, where I am now in my 40s, I'm very proud and confident to say that my integrity levels are at a full-time fucking high. Full-time, meaning full operation. The funny kind of example that I give is even, so cleaning in my home, I don't have to move the furniture every time I vacuum. This might sound OCD, and that's fine if it does, because I don't care, but it's not. It's actually just, it's important to me. It's like this situation where I can see what I'm doing. I'm witnessing my effort, my work, and I don't want to take a shortcut. I don't want to, I don't want to do it half-assed. Why? Because that's an integrity thing. It's the quote, how you do anything is how you do everything. So if I'm going to make the effort to, vacuum my space, well, then I'm going to move the chair too. It might sound like a funny example. It actually is a funny example. However, it's also a very universal one. I know a lot of you are like, shit. I'm not trying to call anybody out. I'm just saying, I'm giving a real life, everyday example of how, even in these smaller moments, how integrity shows up, right? So why is integrity so important? It's massive. Number one, integrity essentially is you living up to your word, right? Your actions and your words are a match. They are in alignment, right? And if those two things are not in alignment, not only, will it cause a disruption in trust to your external relationships, but moreover, it actually prevents you from trusting yourself. Why would you? If you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, okay. And that becomes a very slippery slope, it tends to happen more often than not. So why are you going to trust yourself? You're not going to. And that's a problem, because self-trust is one of the most important attributes that we can, uphold and move through our life with, right? So we might not make that connection that, integrity and self-trust, but it absolutely supports your self-trust, as well as the trust of others. I deeply, deeply value my word. It's connected to my name, right? So if I say I'm going to do something, number one, I'm going to do it because my word matters to me. But number two, because I don't ever want to be flimsy. I don't ever want to be a flake. I always want to stand in my commitments, because that's important to me, right? So it's important to point that out, and really let me tease out the word value there, because your values are, they're so important to how you are moving through your life and how you're essentially creating your life, So integrity is a core value of mine. And what it also does is it keeps a certain standard present in my life that I have to live up to, that I want to live up to. So it's really important, first of all, to know what your core values are, but then to realize that these values, are essentially creating a certain standard that you are living up to. And to me, integrity is such a rich one, because in this one attribute, there's so much that lives in it, right? Again, so it it supports trust to the external, right? To your relationships on the, outside of you, but it also promotes self-trust. It also totally promotes strong levels of self-respect. Self-respect is so important. It's really, really important. I can't put enough emphasis, probably don't need to, but I'm going to tease this out a bit because listen, if you're walking around with low levels of self-respect, that's affecting your confidence, and that is directly affecting, how the actions that you're taking, the commitments that you're holding yourself to in your life, and ultimately, the reality that you're building, right? You're not going to bet on yourself. You're going to play small. You're going to hesitate. You're going to likely have really shitty boundaries. So you might be getting, overstepped by individuals. And it's just a mess, right? Self-respect supports self-esteem, self-confidence. It lives in self-love. So there's a lot of self-action here that all really points back to integrity. And that's why it's such a core value of mine personally, and so worthy of, creating this episode around, because I want, no matter where your integrity levels are or wherever integrity is on your radar, in your psychology, in your self-development, I think it's a really, really important subject and attribute for you, for all of us, to continually make sure that we have strong levels of, and that we are living up to. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. Please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review.